When we're trapping, it always seems like we're digging holes or moving dirt. So you're gonna have a variety of shovels and that sort of thing. So if you're digging a small hole, maybe in a dirt hole set, small shovel like this one happens to be kind of rounded, so you can stick it in the ground, twist it, pull out little plugs of dirt. You can manage this pretty good. It's got a nice T-handle on it. This is a very solid shovel. Another version of that same shovel for working in the a little bit deeper water, say, or digging deeper holes in the bank would be something like this. We talked about safety a little bit. Another good thing when you're walking the water is to have some sort of wading staff, and a shovel that's a little bit longer like this would work out good. Same deal with this shovel here. It's got a nice D handle on it. It gives you a good grip. When everything's wet, it's hard to hold on to. So any kind of shovel with a T or a D handle on it gives you good grip, and you can work the bank a little bit and won't have as much fatigue on yourself. Some of the dirt traps, the dirt trappers will use more of a hole in the ground, and you can, like I said, either dig a hole like this. If you don't want to work quite as hard, you can get something like this that you put in a drill. Just auger a hole into the ground. If you don't want to deal with electronic batteries and still want to use the auger type system, there's hand augers, just kind of like the older tools. So you literally just screw it in the ground and you keep pulling the dirt out, and that'll give you a nice uniform hole. When you're setting your traps, you're going to need some sort of anchoring system, whether it be a re-rod stake, varying lengths depending on the soil conditions. Sometimes you're going to pound them straight in with a shorter stake. Sometimes you're going to cross the stake if it's a little bit sandier or wetter ground. There's a cable anchor, kind of like this. There's different versions. This happens to just be one brand that we had handy. You're going to pound that into the ground. When you give it a pull, that anchor turns sideways. Gives you a lot more holding power. The advantage of this over this is it's lightweight. They are a little hard to pull out of the ground, so you're going to need something to help pry them out of the ground. If you're going to be pounding stakes into the ground, you need some sort of hammer. This is just a simple sledgehammer. That's what you're going to use to run a driver like this into the ground. How that works on this type of earth anchor. Pound it into the ground, pull that back out, give that a little tug, and it'll set it back in there. So obviously you're going to need a hammer to drive stakes in the ground. The difference on this hammer here, there's a little digger on the back, kind of a claw, so you can pound your stake in, chop out a trap bed, scrape dirt, whatever you need to do. If you need to chop some sticks, you have a little bit of a sharp edge on there, similar to a hatchet or an axe. So pretty handy tool. They make some of these that have a bent out pipe on them that you can actually grab and dig holes with too, kind of a 3-in-1 type tool. That's a pretty handy item. This happens to be an S-hook tool. It's used to close and open S-hooks. Very helpful in the trap line. That's how we're connecting chains or connecting traps to anchors and that sort of thing. So that's a very helpful tool to have. Wire cutters or cable cutters are also almost a necessity. Anytime if you can't pull an anchor out, or if you have to cut wire, if you're gonna be using snares, you're definitely gonna want to have the cable cutters to help get the animals out of the sets and clean up after yourself a little bit. There's a lot of different versions. If you're going to use a lot of cable, a lot of wire, a good cutters is worth its weight in gold. Generally, you're not going to wear them out, you're going to lose them first. So you notice a lot of my stuff is painted orange or a bright color. That's by design so that you don't lose it out in the dry grasses. Wire is also always a necessity on the trap line, whether it's wiring things together that are broken or trying to anchor traps. This is just a little deal I did with tape. Wrap it around, you can pull the wire out of the middle of the coil. Keeps it from getting wrapped up in everything else. If you're going to be setting in dry dirt, the canine sets, the predator type sets, you're going to want some sort of dirt sifter so you can scrape dirt, sift out the big chunks, the grass, throw that away, and have a nice clean dirt pattern to pack around your traps. And we'll learn more about that in some of our other videos. This is called an underall. It's just one specific brand. There's a lot of different brands. Some people use cotton, some people use different sorts of polyfill, like what you would use in sewing applications. That goes underneath the pan of a trap. And then there's also pan covers, whether it's screen or a mesh or wax paper, something to go over top of the pan of trap to keep the dirt from under the trap. As you're packing dirt around the traps, you don't want to go into the pan or the trap simply won't go off. It's always nice to have some sort of a bag. You don't have to have anything fancy. You could have something from your local store, or there are commercial products available as well to hold your different trapping lures and baits, all the different attractants that you use to get specific animals to specific locations. This is a tool bag, lots of different pouches. You can put everything in there. And it helps you be a little bit more efficient on the trap line. If you have your hammer, your cutters, S-hook tools, wire, sifter, shovels, all that stuff is in here. You can grab it and go when you need to make a set. This driver here is a little bit longer. If you're trapping in the water, you may want to use long re-rod stakes. Again, if you're carrying stuff or in a boat, it takes up a lot of weight. You can make these anchors any length you want. This happens to be 16, 18 inches. You can make them 3 or 4 feet long. The advantage of that, you can use a longer driver and drive them farther in the ground to get into solid ground. If you have a lot of silt on a river or a pond, anywhere where there's a lot of silt or very soft dirt, you can run something a little bit deeper and make sure that they're anchored very securely. Anytime you set a trap, you want to make sure that whatever you catch is not going to get away with your traps. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the traps that you can use when you're out in your trap line. The most inexpensive traps are snares or cable restraints. There's different kinds of cables. There's from 16th inch cable up to 8th inch cable, and a lot of different types, whether it's multi-strand or multi-strands of multi-strands, say a 1x19 or a 7x19 cable. There's different kinds of locks on the cables, the cable restraints or snares, as they're commonly referred to. Some are a little bit more complex. Some are very simple. This is a cam lock. Some are just a bent washer. But the purpose of the lock is to do just that. It'll close down and it doesn't open back up. So it'll hold the animal or restrain the animal until you're able to return. In Iowa, we have deer stops. It's something we need to make sure we have in our snares. It only allows them to close to a certain diameter. You go down your snare, there's a thing called a whammy. That will help hold the snare on wire and to help support the snare when it's set. And then you're going to have to anchor that snare, whether it's to a re-rod stake, to a cable anchor, to a tree, whatever it may be. And snares with swivels. Swivels are always great with trapping equipment because they add strength and allow things to move without getting twisted up. So very simple snares. It's small, inexpensive. They're less than $20 a dozen. Sometimes as cheap as $10 or $12. That'd be good for a coon-sized animal. If you go to a coyote-sized animal, it's taller. You're going to need a longer snare to get it higher off the ground. So that's just one option on a snare. Different locks and different lengths of snares is the variable there, and that's a personal preference. But a lot of different options that you can go with. They're very effective. They're inexpensive, but they're a one-time use. Most of the time, you can't reuse the cable after it's caught something. But what you can do is cut the parts off and rebuild your own snares to save a little bit more money and be a little bit more efficient. The next type of trap that we're going to use is a body gripping trap. There's different brands. This happens to be a 110 size trap. That's going to be for the mink and muskrat sized animals. These are kill type traps. You want to be very careful where you place them, making sure that they're not where you may have non-target catches that are that you're putting in danger. So that's a smaller animal size trap. Like I said, the muskrats and mink. They jump up to the next size. This is a 165 or 170 size trap. That's also usable for mink and muskrat in some aspects, but generally used for coon trapping, possums and skunks, that sort of size animal. The next one's a 220, 280. They just keep getting bigger as the number gets bigger, right? And then this is a 330. It's a very common trap. We talked a little bit about safety. All your conibears with 2 springs are going to have a safety latch on each spring. That keeps the springs, allows you to set both springs. On this trap, this is another thing that I failed to point out earlier, but it's a safety spring. So if this trap was inadvertently snapped, it's not going to go off. This is going to keep you safe. So you just don't want the traps around your fingers when you're trying to set them. So this size trap is a little bit bigger. This one needs to be set completely underwater. You can see the size. Generally designed for beavers and otters, and it will catch other animals that are underwater, but most effective for beavers and otters. So there's multitude of foothold type traps. You have the long spring traps, hence the name. They have long springs. You have coil spring traps. They have coils on them. You have underspring traps. The spring is underneath the trap. There's a bend, and when you pull this down, that's what gives the trap its firing power. The long spring traps are very easy to bed because they have a lot of surface area. Coil spring traps are generally a little bit faster, more compact. Most of the land trappers will use these, whereas water trappers generally use the long spring traps more frequently. But coil springs are very common. More of an older style trap, more modern, as in modern in the last not in the last decade, but the last century. You can replace these parts more easily. And the underspring is not something that's popular as much anymore. They're not as convenient to set. They have plenty of holding power. They're extremely effective, but the coil springs are a little less expensive to make than these, and the long springs are just a little bit more common. So the next thing you can look at on your Foothold traps is the jaw type. This is just a standard closed jaw trap. It's closed here, standard thickness on the metal, whereas this trap is a little bit thicker jaw, more surface area on the pad, helps prevent any kind of paw damage. And then there's also laminated jaws, where you take the standard jaw, lay a piece of metal under it, and underneath of it, it gives you more surface area. It gives you more holding power on that type trap. You notice on this one, it has more of a square jaw. This is more rounded. Different companies, different brands, and personal preference all kind of come into play there. Another thing you can look at on the jaws is whether they're offset jaws, where there's a gap between them, the standard jaw, where they close tight together, or a rubber jaw, which was designed to lessen the blow and try not to cause damage. We use best management practices, and in association with some of the vets and input from those professionals on how to humanely trap these animals. And in some cases, if these traps aren't taken care of and well maintained, they're actually not as helpful as the standard trap. So just another option with the rubber jaw there. We also have dog-proof type traps, and there's a lot of different brands. Happen to have two different versions here. How they work, again, you're gonna have to anchor your trap. Anytime you can use multiple swivels, the better. It gives you more holding power. These traps, the animal has to reach down in, grab the trigger, and that's when they spring the trap. So they're generally designed for raccoon trapping. You can catch skunks and possums, we've seen that. But they're generally designed to trap raccoons, and they call them dog-proof because there's no way for a dog to get in there and get caught. We're going to talk a little bit about how to anchor your traps. Obviously, you've invested money in the traps. You want to keep them, and you don't want your animals to get away. You want them to be there when you return to your set. So the most common method is the re-rod stake. It's effective. They can pull out sometimes if they're too short or in sandy or muddy ground, and they're a little bit heavy. So we've developed some things over the years. This is the earth anchor. There's a million different kinds. Long story short, it's what we call a cable anchor. You're going to push it in the ground. They have a little bit more holding power. They're very, very lightweight. They're pretty inexpensive. Sometimes with the body gripping style traps, you'll want something that will hold the trap stable so that the animal can walk through it. This just happens to be one different brand. You adjust the height by however far you push it into the ground. So it's going to sit there just like that above the ground. You can kind of turn it this way and that way. You can change the angle on a hillside, that sort of thing. They make different types for different size traps. Put them in the water in front of holes wherever the animals may be. They're also they have different kinds of boxes or cubby type traps. This one's for mink. You put some sort of bait in the back. This holds the trap stable here. Run a re-rod stake through the hole in the back. That way nothing will take off with your trap. And the animal will go in there to get the trap or get the bait and get caught in the trap. So that's another good method. Something that they use mostly in western states. We don't really recommend it here in Iowa, particularly for young trappers, is a drag. And it's just that. If you're in really rocky ground or ground that won't be able to effectively hold a stake, you attach the trap on a chain to this drag. The drag will, when the animal gets caught, it'll move off, catch something, and it won't be right at the set location. It'll be somewhere nearby. Different sized drags for different sized animals, and different lengths of chains for different conditions. But effective. They're illegal to use in Iowa on snares or cable restraints, but they're effective on footholds, but definitely not something we recommend for new trappers. It'd be something more for a veteran trapper who's skilled in tracking and keeping track of where their animals go to. So again, make sure anytime you set a trap, even if you're trapping muskrats, that you anchor your trap for the biggest animal you may catch. So even though you're setting muskrat traps, you may catch a beaver, make sure that your set will hold a beaver. Well, anytime that you invest money in equipment, you want to take care of it, whether it's a car or tools. It's no different with trapping. So you're going to buy a new trap. It's going to have some oil on it. You want to wash it, get all that oil off of there, make the adjustments to the trap to make it function properly. After that, you're going to want to treat the trap with something. Tried and true method is to boil that trap, and this happens to be logwood dye. That'll change the color of the trap, helps inactivate any rust that's on it, and gives you good color. And then you can wax that trap. You boil the water, keep the wax on top, dip the trap through it. Kind of a tedious process. It's very effective. It'll maintain your traps for a long time, especially if you're using any kind of antifreeze or salt. You want to make sure that they're protected. If you don't want to do that, there's different kinds of dips And there's a variety difference. This one happens to be a black dye, there's brown. It really makes no difference on the color of the trap, it's just personal preference. You're gonna mix them with gas or a lantern fuel or white gas. You do not want to use ethanol with them, it'll just turn into kind of a sludge and mess your traps. So when you get done, take a new trap. If you're gonna dip it or dye it, it's gonna look something like this. That's gonna protect it from the elements. Remember, your traps are sitting outside in the mud or in the elements for weeks on end. They're in the moisture in the ground. They may have antifreeze like a salt or something like that to keep the trap functioning in cold weather. And if you don't take care of it, it's going to rust and look something like this, where your investment is going to be worthless. You're going to have to make repairs, and it's not going to function effectively and help you mainly trap animals.